UFC 318 Holloway, Poirier from New Orleans, breaking down the entire main event and a couple of best bets along the way. Let's get to it. We lead off the main event in New Orleans with Michael Johnson and Daniel Zellhuber. Michael Johnson comes into this fight with a bit of a career resurgence as of late. He's won 4 of his last 6 when he had dropped his previous 4 fights before that. I thought that had kind of signaled the end of his career, but he's looked good in his resurgence again. 4 wins in his last 6 fights. He is going to be a heavy underdog going up against Daniel Zellhuber, coming in with a 15-2 MMA record. He trains Extreme Couture out in Las Vegas, and he has looked very good too. I don't know if I agree of him being such a big favorite, so I'm not going to have a best bet here. I can't go all the way to betting Michael Johnson. But if you're on the fence and want to get talked into it, I guess, here's kind of my pitch. Is they're both 3-2 in their last 5 fights. Zellhuber's actually coming off of a loss. Michael Johnson's coming off of back-to-back wins. Now, the thing to be careful with and why Zellhuber is the favorite, he is 13 years younger, so he's 26. Michael Johnson is coming into this fight at 39. Again, he's 15-2, whereas Johnson is 23-19. So Johnson's going to come into this fight at a plus 440 underdog, which is it's pretty heavy, but you can kind of see why. Zellhuber has a huge reach advantage, 15-2, 13 years younger. He's taller. I think Zellhuber wins this fight. That's going to be my prediction. But again, if you're a big Michael Johnson fan, I can't really blame you for taking a flyer on him at plus 440, especially with him being 4-2 in those last 6. Moving on, we have Dan Ige and Patricio Pitbull. This is going to be a great fight. I expect a lot of fun, and I'm actually going to have not one, but 2 best bets for here. Well, one's a best bet. One's a little bit of a long shot. I'd really consider anything over, plus 300 to be a pretty substantial long shot, and I will have one for you there. Let's break down this fight a little bit. So, last we saw Dan Ige, it was at UFC 314, where he was able to finish Sean Woodson. Ige was really undersized in this fight. Woodson is a very long guy, but Ige was able to get in, close that distance, and get a finish. Woodson considered it a controversial stoppage. I think Ige did enough to win that fight, and I think they made the right move there. Ige does come in 2-3 in his last 5. However, both of those wins were by knockout. When we look on the other side, Pitbull made his UFC debut also at UFC 314 against Yair Rodriguez, where he lost in a decision. Pitbull is also 2-3 in his last 5 and dropped his UFC debut. So, what is the best bet for this fight? To me, I think the best bet here is going to be under 2.5 rounds at plus 200 is where it's sitting at right now. Why do I like that? So, Pitbull did not like the fact that his last fight went to decision, and Ige has that finishing power. I am tending to lean Ige here for the prediction for the winner, and I'm going to make that prediction here too. So, Ige, I predict to win the fight, and I think this fight does go under. Now, if Ige doesn't win the fight, I still think Pitbull has the ability to finish. His last fight in Bellator, he did win by TKO over Jeremy Kennedy. So we're going to go under 2.5 plus 200. My long shot that I also like here, we're going to look at kind of combining those two, right? So Dan Ige, in his last 2 victories, won by knockout. I think Dan Ige is going to win. I also think this fight is going to go under. So you can kind of put 2 and 2 together here. We're going to go with a long shot best bet of Dan Ige to win by knockout. That is going to be at plus 330. Up next, a fight between two veterans, Kevin Holland, the fan favorite, and Daniel Rodriguez. So, Kevin Holland, 28-13 in his career. He's coming off of that very nice submission win over Vicente Luque at UFC 316 back in June. He also beat Gunnar Nelson the time out before that. Overall, 3-2 in his last 5, coming off a 2-fight win streak. We also have Daniel Rodriguez. So, Daniel Rodriguez, also UFC veteran, coming in, 38 years old, 19-5. Very similar story to Kevin Holland. Now, he's 2-3 in his last 5, but the catch here, he's won his last 2. So he's on a little bit of a roll. And I think this is a very close fight, and it's a lot closer than the sportsbooks are giving Daniel Rodriguez credit for. And I love Kevin Holland. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch, and I'm sure he's one of your favorite fighters to watch too. But in this case, I'm going to have to go with another long shot on Daniel Rodriguez at plus 425. I think there's just way too much value here. He looked really impressive his last time out. He fought at UFC on ESPN 67, so back in May. He won by knockout. So both these guys are coming off of finishes. I really like Rodriguez here and that value at plus 425. Going into my last fight with Kevin Holland, I remember breaking down on UFC 316. He was 2-3 coming in, and I really wanted to stay off because he was going up against Luque, who had also not been super impressive. So while it was fun for me to see Kevin Holland win and have that nice anaconda choke, beat Vicente Luque, I wasn't super surprised because Luque hadn't really looked all that great as of late either. Now he's going up against somebody on the other side, Rodriguez, who has just as many wins in his last 2 fights. They're both coming off of 2-fight win streaks with a decision followed up by a finish. So can Kevin Holland win this fight? Yeah, I mean, I think this fight should probably be about plus 100, maybe Kevin Holland a slight favorite, minus 150. You could even argue up to minus 200. Kevin Holland to be of minus 575. Rodriguez to be plus 425. I just don't really see it there. So I'm going to go with a long shot bet here on Daniel Rodriguez. Co-main event time between Paulo Costa and Roman Kopylov. So this fight was actually supposed to be on that UFC 317 pay-per-view and has now been moved to the UFC 318 co-main event. Let's start with the favorite here, Kopylov. He comes in with an impressive 14-3 MMA record, 4-1 in his last 5. 3 of those wins by knockout. If we look at his MMA career, he has had 12 knockouts in those 14 victories and only 2 decisions, no submissions. So Kopylov has looked really good of late with that TKO win earlier this year over Chris Curtis. On the other side, he's going up against Paulo Costa. Costa 14-4 in his MMA career. Bad news for him here. All 4 of those losses have happened in the last 5 years. He is 1-4 in his last 5. So with that, we have one guy who's 4-1 in his last 5. Costa is 1-4 in his last 5. I think you can see where I'm going with a prediction here. We're going to go with Roman Kopylov to win. That is my prediction. That is not my best bet. Kopylov comes in minus 225. I think that's probably fair, maybe a little bit low, but I don't think that's where the value is for a best bet. For that, we are going to go to the under 2.5 rounds at plus 175. So, Costa has knockout capabilities. Of his 14 career MMA wins, he has 11 knockouts and 1 submission. So does this fight end on the ground? Almost certainly not. But you have a guy who has 11 knockouts and you have another guy who has 12 knockouts. So a pretty substantial amount of their victories have come through this method of finishing the fight on the feet. And I think that happens again. And to get this at plus 175 feels like a really good deal for me, especially when we look at Kopylov. He's been rolling and he has been knocking people out left and right. Since 2022, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 knockouts. So that in 6 wins. So again, 5 of his last 6 wins were all knockouts. All of those in the UFC. So these aren't knockouts in these lower level MMA promotions where he's just completely overmatching his opponent. He's going up against UFC fighters and knocking them out left and right. Costa, I think, is going to be feeling a little bit of pressure to make something happen in this fight. And when that happens, you get aggressive fighters, which can either be good for them or can be really bad for them. Either way, it usually ends with the ref stopping the fight early. So we're going to go under 2.5 rounds at plus 175. I also have one more long shot of the night right here on this card. You saw I picked Kopylov to win. You saw we just made a best bet on the under 2.5, much like that Ige and Pitbull fight. You can kind of see where this long shot is going. We're going to take Roman Kopylov to win by knockout at plus 330. Now, this is probably my favorite bet of the night. I think this is the best value you're gonna probably see. And again, I'll just reiterate everything I just said. He has 6 wins in the UFC since 2022 when he came into the UFC. He has 5 of those wins by knockout, including his last one earlier this year. Costa's going to be aggressive. I don't think that plays very well for him here with Kopylov being such a knockout artist. I think it happens again. So we're going to go Kopylov with a long shot bet at plus 330. Main event time, the retirement fight for Dustin Poirier taking place in his backyard in New Orleans. This is a very, very interesting fight, and this line has moved quite a bit. So Holloway actually opened up the underdog and now has moved to the favorite. So let's break this down a little bit. We'll start with Max Holloway. Obviously, last time out, lost to Ilia Topuria. Before that, had that wild fight at UFC 300 with Justin Gaethje. So before that Topuria fight, Holloway was 4-1 in his last 5, with his only other loss coming to Volkanovski. So we look at Holloway, his only 2 losses since 2021 are to Volk and Topuria. Probably 2 of the best fighters going right now. Not probably. So we look at Holloway since 2021. He only has 2 losses, has 6 wins. Those 2 losses are to Ilia Topuria by knockout and to Alexander Volkanovski. You're talking about 2 top 5 pound-for-pound fighters, and those are the only guys Holloway's lost to. He finished Korean Zombie. He finished Justin Gaethje. He's beaten Yair Rodriguez, Calvin Kattar, and Arnold Allen along the way as well. So a pretty impressive resume of late for Max Holloway. I'm not sure why people are treating him, or he was earlier in the week at least being treated. He lost to Topuria and now he's terrible. It's like, okay, everybody's been losing to Topuria. That guy has steel in his gloves is what it looks like to me. So now we take a look on the other side. We have Dustin Poirier coming in for his last fight in the UFC. Last time out, lost to Islam Makhachev. Can't really blame him for that. But as we look further down the list of recent fights is where I get a little concerned. And we're going to go with a prediction here of Max Holloway. No best bet. The it factor of it being a retirement fight for Dustin Poirier, I can't go there and bet against him. But based off of what I've seen recently, I can't bet for him either. So 2-3 in his last 5. Did lose to Islam last time out, and then has kind of alternated wins and losses since then. However, I look at common opponents. He lost to Justin Gaethje by a knockout. Holloway defeated Justin Gaethje by a knockout, and he didn't really need to defeat Justin Gaethje by a knockout when Holloway did it either. He had that fight won and wanted to put on a show for the fans in the center of the octagon, calling Gaethje there as they both swung for the fences, and Holloway landed that knockout blow. So, to me, Holloway is favored now. He should be favored now. If you were able to get him when he was an underdog, I'm happy for you. That is not available at this point in time for me. So I'm going to go with a prediction of Max Holloway to win. We're going no best bet. I'm very looking forward to enjoying this last ride for Dustin Poirier for the BMF belt. This is going to be a great fight. Again, I lean Holloway. I like both of these fighters. This is going to be a great night of fights. Okay, so now that we have gone all the way through the main event, let's go through a quick recap of all the bets from the night. So, starting off with Dan Ige and Pitbull, we're going to go under 2.5 at plus 200, and Ige to win by knockout at plus 330. Kevin Holland, Daniel Rodriguez, we're going to go with Rodriguez at plus 410. And then the last fight we will have bets on is Costa and Kopylov. We're going to go under 2.5 at plus 175. Then we're going to go Kopylov to win by knockout at plus 330. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, remember to bet smart and lift heavy.